He was shoved out of the mall amidst mocking laughter and approving glances from the crowd, all because of the red MAGA hat he proudly wore. The security guard reveled in his moment of glory, confident that he had put this provocateur in his place. But no one knew who this man really was or why his quiet exit was only the beginning. What happened next left everyone speechless. James Holloway, a man in his 40s, walked into the shopping mall with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in control. He was dressed in elegant, casual attire, an ivory-colored shirt, dark trousers, and leather shoes. But the most striking part of his outfit was the bright red MAGA hat, which instantly attracted disapproving stares. He paid no mind to them. His attention focused entirely on his phone as he carefully read a message from his team. "Preparations are complete. See you at the site." As he stepped inside, he headed toward the information desk. However, after only a few strides, he noticed a security guard staring him down. The guard, a hefty man in his mid-30s with a stocky build, moved toward James with the determination of someone stopping a criminal. "Sir, we do not allow such symbols in this mall," the guard began with unhidden hostility. James raised his eyes, squinting slightly. "And what exactly do you mean by such symbols?" he asked. The guard pointed demonstratively at the red hat. "Your hat. It's making other visitors uncomfortable. I'm going to have to ask you to either take it off or leave the premises." The crowd around them froze. Whispers filled the air like spectators, waiting for the climax of a bad reality show. "It's just a hat," James replied calmly, showing no reaction to the growing tension. But the guard wasn't backing down. "Your choice of attire is unacceptable here. I won't discuss it further." "No need," James said, a hint of sarcasm in his tone. "Tell me, does your manager know you make decisions like this?" The question threw the guard off balance for a moment. He hesitated, then quickly regained his composure. "I'm in charge here, and I'm telling you to leave," he declared. James sighed and raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. "As you wish. Just remember this decision, because I think you'll have to explain it." Amid the disapproving gazes of onlookers, James turned and walked toward the exit. But before leaving, he paused, glanced back, and with a calm smile said, "Good luck. You're going to need it." The scene hung in the air like the anticipation of something momentous, known only to a few. The onlookers exchanged puzzled glances, wondering who this man was and why he had accepted humiliation so calmly. Meanwhile, the guard, confident in his victory, had no idea how quickly he would pay for his bold decision. The next day, the guard, Victor, proudly recounted his heroic act to his colleagues. He gestured dramatically, mimicking James's voice. "Oh, you'll need luck. Who does he think he is? Just because he wears that red rag, he thinks he can act all high and mighty." His co-workers, rookies and equally self-assured veterans, laughed, cheering him on. "Well done, Victor. You showed that politician wannabe who's boss." However, early in the shift, something unusual caught Victor's attention. People in sharp suits began entering the mall. They moved with purpose, as though they knew exactly why they were there. One approached the administration desk and, without introducing himself, asked, "Is the manager available? We're here for our meeting with Mr. Holloway." Victor tensed upon hearing the name. Holloway? Where have I heard that name before? Meanwhile, the suited man spoke with the mall's manager, who looked flustered, nodding repeatedly as though caught off guard. When Victor approached to find out what was happening, the manager waved him off hurriedly. "Victor, please tend to your duties. We have this under control." Then something Victor hadn't expected happened. The mall's doors opened again, and James walked in. But this time, he wasn't wearing casual clothes. His dark navy blue suit, perfectly tailored to his frame, and his confident posture instantly marked him as someone of significance. And of course, the MAGA hat was still perched on his head. James walked straight toward Victor, every step charging the air with tension. Shoppers stopped in their tracks, staring at this unexpected return. "Good morning," James said, stopping directly in front of the guard. "I hope you have fewer questions about my hat today." Victor frowned, trying to maintain his composure, though his insides churned. "You're here again. Didn't I ask you to leave yesterday?" Not quite, James replied calmly, folding his arms. You didn't ask. I was forced out. But I decided to return because, as it turns out, I have business here. At that moment, the mall manager, pale as a sheet, stepped forward, trying to intervene. But James raised a hand, silencing him. I think your employee should explain to everyone here why I'm not welcome in this building. After all, he was so sure of himself yesterday. The crowd, now gathering in earnest, murmured among themselves. Some pulled out their phones to record the unfolding drama. Look, Victor began, his tone shifting uncomfortably. We were just following protocol. It was, well, a precautionary measure. Precautionary? James stepped closer, his calm demeanor growing unnervingly intense. Interesting. Explain what threat I posed. Victor faltered, realizing the situation was slipping out of his hands. He glanced at the manager for help, but the manager merely buried his face in his hands, fully aware of the disaster unfolding. James turned to the crowd, raising his voice slightly. May I take a moment to explain why I'm here? The crowd nodded eagerly, some even clapping, anticipating answers. Victor, on the other hand, looked like he wanted to disappear. James smiled and spoke clearly. I'm here because this building belongs to me, and I wanted to see how my staff treats customers. Now I know. The room fell silent, as if all the air had been sucked out of it. Victor froze. The manager gasped audibly. The crowd erupted into murmurs and exclamations. Someone shouted, "Get this on camera! Post it online!" Victor tried to say something, but the words caught in his throat. Meanwhile, James added, "But this is only the beginning. I'm confident we'll find a way to correct what I witnessed yesterday." He stepped aside, leaving Victor standing there, fully aware of the gravity of his mistake. The crowd's reaction only heightened his humiliation. The outcome was clear. For Victor, the day was only beginning, and it promised to be the worst of his life. The crowd gathered around the information desk was captivated by what they had just heard. Murmurs grew louder until someone exclaimed, "Are you serious? He's the owner?" Victor stood frozen, his face pale as if all the blood had drained from it. The mall manager, who had been attempting to maintain an air of control, began fumbling to explain himself. "Mr. Holloway, I didn't know you. We didn't know you'd be arriving yesterday." But James cut him off sharply, his voice firm. "You didn't know? Does that change how people are treated here? Or do your employees only treat customers with respect when they think it might benefit them?" The crowd burst into applause, and someone shouted, "Now that's justice!" Victor made a feeble attempt to defend himself. "Sir, I didn't mean... I was just following the rules. It was a misunderstanding." James turned to him, his expression so piercing it could stop anyone in their tracks. "A misunderstanding? You kicked me out of my own building because of a hat. You didn't bother to ask who I was or explain why my hat was a problem. You let your biases cloud your judgment." Victor swallowed hard and looked to the manager for help. But the manager, fully aware of his own precarious position, took a step back, distancing himself from the situation. James turned to address the crowd. "Let me explain why this moment is so important to me. When I decided to buy this mall, my goal was to create a space where everyone, regardless of their beliefs, attire, or background, could feel welcome. I wanted this to be a place for everyone. And what do I see? An employee who thinks it's his right to decide who belongs here and who doesn't." The crowd erupted into applause, and some began cheering. Victor looked as though he wished he could vanish. James paused, letting the weight of his words sink in, before turning back to the manager. "Gather all the employees. We're addressing this now. And yes, Victor, you'll be staying too." The manager, realizing he had no choice, quickly nodded and began giving orders. As mall employees began gathering, the crowd of onlookers only grew. People took out their phones, recording everything. Videos with hashtags like "Justice in the MAGA Hat" were already flooding social media. When the employees were assembled, James picked up the microphone used for mall announcements and addressed everyone. Today is a lesson for all of us. It doesn't matter who you are or what you're wearing. Everyone deserves respect. I wanted to see how my team operates, and unfortunately, I've found that we have much to improve. But know this, from this moment on, there will be no room for bias or discrimination here. This is a place for everyone, and I will make sure it stays that way. The hall erupted into applause. People shouted words of approval, and someone yelled, "Now that's leadership!" Victor, meanwhile, looked as though he wanted to sink into the floor. He stared at James with a mixture of fear and desperation, fully aware that his fate now rested in the hands of the man he had wronged. As if sensing his thoughts, James added, "As for those who have forgotten what respect looks like, they will have one chance to make things right. Just one. If that chance is wasted, they will no longer be part of my team." The words were clearly directed at Victor, who nodded nervously, understanding he had no other option. The crowd began to disperse, buzzing with excitement over what had just transpired. Most left smiling, inspired by how James had handled the situation. But for Victor, the ordeal wasn't over yet. A serious conversation with the new owner awaited him. In a large conference room within the mall, employees and managers sat tensely, waiting for the meeting to begin. Victor was in the front row, looking as though he were attending his own trial. Others whispered among themselves, avoiding eye contact with James Holloway, who stood at the edge of the stage, reviewing a stack of documents. When James stepped to the center, he took the microphone and surveyed the room. His expression was both calm and commanding, like a teacher about to deliver a stern lecture. The room fell silent. The tension was palpable. "Friends," he began, his voice steady, "let's have an honest conversation. Yesterday, I witnessed something that made me question whether basic courtesy and respect are valued here." His gaze swept over the audience, and everyone instinctively straightened in their seats. "I purchased this mall to create a place where everyone would feel welcome. But what did I see? An employee who not only allowed his bias to dictate his actions, but attempted to enforce it as a rule." James turned toward Victor, who sat rigidly in his chair, his knuckles white as he gripped his knees. "Victor," James said, his tone calm but unnervingly direct, "would you like to explain what made you eject a customer, who, by the way, had done nothing wrong?" Victor swallowed hard, licked his lips, and stood. He tried to speak confidently, but his voice trembled. "Sir, I was trying to protect the mall's reputation. I didn't know you—" "Didn't know I was the owner," James interrupted. "And if I hadn't been, would your behavior have been justified?" Victor fell silent, realizing every word he said was digging him deeper into the hole. "Let me be clear, Victor," James continued, his voice growing firmer. "You didn't just embarrass yourself. You embarrassed this mall. You forgot that working here isn't about personal opinions. It's about serving every customer with respect." The crowd clapped, nodding in agreement. James stepped back, giving Victor a moment to absorb his words. Then, after a pause, he spoke again. "Here's what I've decided. Victor, you made a mistake, but I believe people can change, so I'm giving you a chance to prove that you can work here and respect every customer, regardless of their views." Victor exhaled, clearly relieved. "However," James added, his tone turning icy again, "if I see even the slightest hint of bias from you again, your time here will be over. Do you understand me?" "Yes, sir," Victor said quickly, nodding fervently, as though praying for the humiliation to end. James turned to address the rest of the team. "As for the rest of you," his voice rose so everyone could hear, "from this day forward, we will reevaluate how we treat our customers. I want every person who walks into this mall to feel respected. If anyone here isn't prepared to follow that principle, tell me now." Silence. Not a single person spoke or stood. James smiled, his demeanor softening. "Good. Then I believe we can turn this mall into a place we can all be proud of. A place this entire city can admire." The room erupted into applause. People stood, clapping louder and louder. Someone even shouted, "Now that's leadership!" As the meeting ended, employees began to leave. Victor, red-faced, quietly approached James and muttered, "Thank you for the chance, sir. I promise I'll do better." James nodded, looking at him seriously. "Don't promise me, Victor. Show me." With that, James turned and walked out, leaving behind an impression that would be talked about for years. The next day, the mall was back in full swing, but the atmosphere had shifted. Employees smiled more, greeted customers warmly, and seemed genuinely eager to help. James, watching from the second-floor balcony, removed his MAGA hat and looked at it with a faint smile. "Sometimes," he said to himself, "all it takes to set things right is a hat and a little patience." With that, he headed to his office, ready to draft plans for further improvements to his newly reformed mall.